Committee on Health. Pursuant to the orders of reference of Tuesday, March 24th and Saturday, April 11th, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters relating to the government response on the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place entirely by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. As at last meeting, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. In order to facilitate our work here today and the work of the interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Firstly, interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have a choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar while you are speaking. When you release the bar, your mic will mute itself, just like a walkie-talkie. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raise hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak. In order to do so, you should click on Participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click Raise Hand. When speaking, speak slowly and clearly, and when you're not speaking, please ensure that your mic is muted. The use of headsets is strongly encouraged. If you have a microphone on your headset that hangs down, please make sure it is not rubbing on your shirt during your questioning time. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation, or if you're accidentally disconnected, please advise the chair or clerk immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times, as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on the screen in the top right-hand corner, if you're on a PC, I guess, and ensure that you're on gallery view. With this view, you should be able to see all of the participants in a grid view. It will ensure that all video participants can see one another. During this meeting, we will follow the same rules that usually apply to opening statements and the questioning of witnesses during our regular meetings. Each witness will have 10 minutes for an opening statement, followed by the usual rounds of questions from members. And we have an agreement amongst all parties that we will do 3 rounds of questions. We will start with Dr. Ataran as an individual, professor, faculty of law, University of Ottawa. Dr. Ataran, I note that you have sent in a brief. Unfortunately, we cannot distribute that brief until it is translated. The brief has gone to translation, and it will be distributed to the committee when that is done. So, Dr. Ataran, if you'd like to do your presentation, 10 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, it's Don Davies here. I have a point of order.
Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hesitate to interrupt your proceedings, but on that latter point, I understand that Dr. Ataran has worked with a global team of researchers at the Universities of California in Berkeley and San Francisco, the London School of Hygiene, Imperial College, and the University of Ottawa. And the epidemiological study that he sent to the clerk last week is the first and only modeling document, I think, epidemiological model in all of Canada. So I'm just wondering if we could, given that it's gone to translation and we will be getting it shortly, if we could have unanimous consent from the committee to distribute that model to all of us right now. Given that, of course, urgency, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, it might be as wise as possible to get that data to us as soon as we can, knowing that it's coming in French very quickly. So I would seek unanimous consent from my colleagues.
Dr. Ataran submitted a brief some days ago, I believe, that has been translated and distributed to the committee. The brief I was speaking of was just submitted about an hour ago. And that has not yet been transmitted. I'm unable to ask for unanimous consent. We're not really able to do votes under the authorization of the chair, except for witnesses, or under the authorization of the House. So, and the House of Commons procedures really don't permit distribution of documents that are not in both official languages. And it's actually, of course, it's in fairness to the French-speaking members of the committee as well. So we will go ahead with Dr. Adarand's statement. Please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored for your invitation. Thank you. Like you, I'm a Canadian who wishes to get our country out from under COVID-19. I come at this as a professor of both public health and law at the University of Ottawa. I learned my science, laterally immunology, at Berkeley, Caltech, and Oxford, and my law at UBC, after which I taught public health and government at both Harvard and Yale, and worked on global health projects with various NGOs, the World Health Organization, governments, and corporations. As a science communicator, I've been part of the editorial team of the Canadian Medical Association Journal and The Lancet. Today, however, I'm testifying as an individual. Unlike some of your other witnesses, nobody except the university pays my salary, so I have no conflict of interest to declare. I'm here today because I want to explain scientifically how to get Canada out of the dark tunnel that we are in. There is light at the end of this tunnel, but whether we get there quickly or slowly, safely or dangerously, depends on the choices of government and the oversight of Parliament. Since much of what I'm saying was published in Maclean's 3 weeks ago, you've got a copy of my article. There's no need to take notes on this little boring lecture of mine. Let's break it down into two parts. First, let's discuss what government can do right to save lives and rescue our families and businesses. But later, let's talk about what governments did horribly wrong leading to this pandemic. As we are talking right now, most provinces are at or nearing the crest of the first wave of infections. Thankfully, it is not a tidal wave, because self-isolation, quarantine, and, quote, social distancing all worked and broke the chain of infection temporarily. But I must emphasize, surviving that first wave is not a victory. Social distancing bought us time, but it does not solve the problem. There's an end game that lies ahead, which will take over a year. Why is this? Because most of us still haven't met SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus behind COVID-19. So we haven't fought off the virus and developed immunity to the virus. If you think back a month ago, Canadians went into self-isolation because most didn't have immunity. And isolation was the only way to avoid getting crushed in a catastrophe. Since then, isolated Canadians have been through a lot of beer and TV, but sitting on our bums as we have has not magically made us immune. Netflix does not a vaccine make, and we are just as immunologically susceptible as before, meaning that if isolation ends for everyone at the same time, we will immediately return to the same hellish spot that we just dodged. So the end game must not relax self-isolation for everyone at once. Instead, it has to be careful, scientifically tailored stages. There is no other way, none, to reopen Canada. Or what I'm saying is that instead of, quote, flattening the curve, which is a misleading, scientifically wrong metaphor that really shouldn't be used, really the end game is about stretching and slicing a single giant curve of infections into a timed series, scientifically planned number of measured curvelets. Or to use an analogy, imagine a giant wildfire that rips through a whole forest. Now, instead of that, imagine asking the fire chief to light smaller, controlled burns over time. The forest still burns, but the harm is less. Stretching and slicing the epidemiological curve into managed curvelets is like that controlled burn. And in the hands of a well-informed public health chief, staging these disease curvelets does not stop people getting sick with COVID. It does, though, make it manageable and reduces the number of people dying of COVID. Short of a vaccine, which is absolutely out of reach in 2020, staged curvelets are not just the best we can do, they are the only thing we can do. Which brings me now to my dissatisfaction and a plea for Parliament's help. As we sit here, we have federal and provincial governments that are botching this endgame. To date, neither the Minister of Health nor Dr. Tam have presented a concrete plan for staging the curvelets, and we need one now. Worse, they are concealing data and interfering with outside scientists solving the problem. I emphasize this to you. It is impossible for scientists inside or outside government to do the best job planning these curvelets without excellent disease surveillance, data sharing, and epidemiological modeling. The next steps of reopening Canadian society, which we all want, by curvelets, must be planned exquisitely, or we will accidentally kill people. Then, once each curvelet is launched, local public health officers everywhere need more and faster COVID testing than they have, so as to detect and stamp out little outbreaks before they explode. Yet in all these areas, the testing, the epidemiological data and modeling, Canada's performance is pretty dreadful compared to the leaders such as Hong Kong, Norway, South Korea, or Switzerland. And let me explain. Scientists need transparent data on the disease from every province to make mathematically and medically accurate disease models and forecasts. But we're not there because the provinces hold the data and sharing it with the Public Health Agency of Canada is optional. They have no legal obligation to share. Then, even more foolishly, the Public Health Agency of Canada censors the data before it's disclosed to scientists, probably to avoid embarrassing certain provinces. The results that scientists inside and outside government only have an incomplete data picture to work with. And with one eye gouged out, they can't churn out the best possible epidemiological forecasts, meaning that we as Canada bumble into this endgame unfit and unready. Just like farmers need accurate weather forecasts for planting, we need accurate epidemiological forecasts in this business too, or people will needlessly die and the economy will needlessly suffer. Now, probably because of these data sharing failures, PHAC is struggling to model the epidemic. Last week, Dr. Tam presented a tiny bit of the PHAC model, but frankly, it was incomplete, it contained errors, and it was largely unscientific. This drove some of us from universities in Berkeley, London, San Francisco, and Ottawa to release our own model this morning. I wish it had been shared with you. Apparently, it cannot be. Otherwise, I'd be able to present you some of the results, some of the key findings. It is the first epidemiological model of all of Canada over the coming year. But at the end of the day, it is a real problem that these data sharing gaps exist. Parliament heard from the Auditor General in 1999, 2002, and 2008 about the government's failure to prepare for disease emergencies. The Auditor General put her finger on data sharing as a problem 3 times. And then in 2003, Canada was hit by SARS severely. The federal government did a lessons learned study, which recommended that Parliament legislate data sharing between the federal and provincial levels. It wasn't done. 5 years later, the unanimous editors of the Canadian Medical Association Journal again howled at Parliament to legislate open data sharing. We were ignored. So now, members, I'm imploring, legislate rules for data sharing immediately, or we can't build the best models and give you the best forecast, and you will lose lives. And while you're at it, set minimum national standards for how Ottawa and the provinces plan, prepare, and act during pandemics. Constitutionally, health is a shared jurisdiction, whether it's emergency legislation or using the federal government's quarantine power in Section 91(11) of the Constitution Act. Take this on as a private member's bill. Override the standing orders if you have to. Just don't wait for the government to do it. The Prime Minister won't. If you look at the mandate letters that he gave his health ministers, Dr. Philpott, Ms. Petitpas-Taylor, and now Ms. Hajdu, none of his 3 mandate letters even mentions pandemics. I'm not pleased with Mr. Trudeau, for despite warning upon warning, pandemic preparation was never even the lowest of his priorities to his ministers. So if you wonder why even simple things like stockpiling N95 masks for our nurses and doctors didn't happen, it's because pandemic preparation was never a Canadian priority. And so now it falls on this House to do better. I stand ready to help this House in any way that you ask in the climb toward the light at the end of the tunnel. But let us please both be clear. Canada is in a predicament because Canada prepared poorly. The virus is the biological agent of the pandemic, but government failure is the cause of our plight. To me, this is not a scientist pandemic, but a bureaucrat's pandemic brought on by ignored warnings and quite miserable laws. Now the end game is upon us. The efforts of this Parliament will leave historians to decide whether Canada did all it could to fight the pandemic and to prepare for the next pandemic. Oh, and yes, there will be a next pandemic. Scientists can give you quite decent guesses about it. Let's just say that COVID-19 isn't especially bad, and we've anticipated much worse. Thank you for bearing with me. I apologize for these extraordinarily blunt messages. I'm very pleased to take your questions, or maybe your fire. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Attaran. We go now to the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Dr. Michael Strong, President. Please go ahead, Dr. Strong, 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak about the importance of research and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research pivotal role in Canada's response to COVID-19. Before we begin, I want to express my sincere appreciation and gratitude to all the healthcare professionals, frontline and essential workers who are tirelessly working to support the health, safety, and well-being of Canadians. This includes many employees who work with my federal colleagues present with me today. I also wish to commend the incredible efforts to date of the Canadian research community. I am proud to say that our researchers are among the very best in the world, and they've played a key role so far in coordinating both the global and domestic research response to COVID-19. And so I'm pleased to be with you today to provide the committee with more details on COVID-19 research currently underway in the country and abroad, as well as outline the research initiatives that CIHR has been able to rapidly implement in response to the pandemic. But before I do so, and recognizing that a collective and collaborative approach has been a key element of success in the current circumstances, I wish to emphasize that CIHR's efforts to address the COVID-19 outbreak continue to be undertaken in close collaboration with our federal partners, including Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, Innovation, Science and Economic Development, and the National Research Council, amongst many others. CIHR is also working hand in hand with international partners, such as the World Health Organization and the Global Research Collaboration for Infectious Disease Preparedness, otherwise known as GLOPADAR. This is a coalition of 29 countries to establish a global research and innovation roadmap and determine how Canadian researchers could help in the global research efforts. It's important to highlight that one of the CIHR's scientific directors is currently vice chair of GLOPADAR, and as such, our scientific leadership played a key role from the outset and continues to be a key hub in facilitating this fast-moving collaboration that is needed across a multiplicity of players, domestically and internationally. Furthermore, to ensure that research evidence is shared rapidly and openly to inform the public health response and to help save lives, CIHR has joined 67 international research funding organizations in signing a joint statement to share research data and findings relevant to the COVID-19 outbreak. We also support the calls made by chief science advisors around the world to ensure that research outputs, such as data and publications, are publicly available to support the ongoing global emergency response efforts. And as such, in early February, our organization moved rapidly to mobilize the research community to coordinate a rapid response to the COVID-19. In just a few weeks, CIHR was able to select, through a rigorous peer review process, the most scientifically excellent research projects that will help us to better understand the biology of the virus, its spread, and identify strategies to fight it. With federal partners and some provincial support, we were able to invest $54.2 million to support 99 COVID-19 research projects. This investment is part of Canada's plan to mobilize science to fight COVID-19, as announced by the Prime Minister on March 23rd, and will greatly contribute to the Government of Canada's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. With this funding, researchers at 36 institutions across the country are working with the utmost urgency to develop and evaluate new vaccines, therapies, and diagnostics, as well as public health strategies to tackle misinformation, stigma, and anxiety. It is important to point out that many of these projects have international collaborations and partnerships with government departments as well as industry, and many are equipped for real-time data sharing. This positions the research to be more quickly translated to effective prevention, detection, clinical management, and policy measures for addressing the COVID-19 outbreak within and across jurisdictions in Canada and internationally. If you will, let me give a few examples of some of the important projects that were funded through this. The first one relates to the identification of vaccines, which we heard a bit about a moment ago. So Dr. Daryl Falzano of the University of Saskatchewan is working with animal models to understand how the SARS-CoV-2 virus, so the actual virus that gives rise to this, causes the disease, and whether vaccines can be developed to protect from the disease and how the virus might actually be transmitted. These are really critical questions that need to be addressed when a new pathogen such as this emerges. Given concerns that less than optimal vaccines or previous exposure to related pathogens could actually worsen the disease, this project is also investigating whether these animal models can be used for testing to ensure that vaccines are safe prior to testing in human clinical trials. Through work led by Dr. Srinivas Murthy at the University of British Columbia, Canada is also currently participating in the WHO Solidarity Trial. This randomized clinical trial, led by Dr. Murthy, involves over 50 hospitals across Canada and is investigating the efficacy of existing combination drugs on patients hospitalized for COVID-19, thereby contributing to the global efforts to study the effectiveness of potential therapies for this disease. We are also supporting research on point-of-care diagnostics. So for instance, Dr. Dennis Boudra at University Laval is working on developing a portable rapid point-of-care test for COVID-19 to enable frontline workers to be rapidly tested for the virus. This device will be developed with an easy-to-use platform that can be operated by untrained personnel, so it can be deployed locally within quarantine regions at temporary health centers and neighborhood clinics, thus reducing the flow of people in urban centers. Critically, we're also supporting research related to social behavior, public health messaging, and clinical management studies. So, for example, Dr. Patrick Newman at Ryerson University will study the impact of infection control routines on nurses to determine how to implement these measures while delivering the highest quality care and maintaining the safety of both patients and nurses. Finally, Dr. Tim Caulfield at the University of Alberta is working to understand the spread of COVID-19 misinformation from multiple angles to develop evidence-based communication and education tools to strategically counter misinformation, stigma, and fear related to the COVID-19 pandemic. This project will provide policy recommendations for public health planning, decision-making, and response for both COVID-19 as well as future outbreaks. These examples and many others will provide the scientific evidence needed to help us fully understand the novel coronavirus and develop tools to fight it. As I mentioned earlier, new research evidence will be useful only if it can be rapidly translated into effective tools and treatments. We recognize that in the coming weeks and months, it will be critical not only to generate, but also to coordinate the sharing and translation of ideas, data, innovative solutions, novel treatments, diagnostics, and vaccine technologies across all levels of government to enhance timely and effective responses. As I reflect on the tremendous work to date that has taken place across government to address this pandemic, I am truly proud to say that the CIHR's research response to COVID-19 has really brought the transformative mandate of our nature of our mandate to life. Through a single, efficient funding call for proposals, we were able to fund outstanding research. Our mandate has always enabled us to support not just knowledge generation, but also the translation of research evidence into improved health for Canadians. On that front, CIHR is leading the development of a series of knowledge mobilization events that strengthen connections between researchers, funded through the COVID-19 Rapid Response Competition, and the Government of Canada departments and agencies in order to accelerate this knowledge translation. We're also strongly encouraging our funded partners to participate in recently launched Can COVID platform. This online platform promotes collaboration, communication, and coordination between Canadian and international researchers working on COVID-19, healthcare practitioners, funding agencies, and government policymakers. So as you can see, the balanced medical, social, and policy research approach that CIHR has taken is critical to ensuring that Canadian science are seeking to understand this virus, its spread, and how to mitigate the impact from a variety of pathways. I'm confident that this approach will help us to quickly develop new evidence-based tools to address the crisis. And in the meantime, we continue to work daily with our national and international partners to address the need for additional research and trials. We know where the gaps are, and looking at ways to further support the scientific community in addressing these gaps as soon as possible is a priority. I would be pleased to report back to your committee on any developments in this regard. Again, thank you for inviting me here to speak about the COVID-19 research underway and the role that research plays in Canada's response to this public health crisis. I'll be very happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Strong. We go now to a joint presentation by three departments. We have the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Mr. Matt de Vleger, Director General, Immigration. We have the Department of Employment and Social Development, Philip Massé, Director General, Temporary Foreign Workers Program, Skills and Employment Branch, and Tara Cosgrove, Executive Director, Temporary Foreign Worker Program and International Mobility Program, Integrity Services Branch of Service Canada. And with the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, we have Stephen Jagoudis, Director, General Policy, Planning and Integration Directorate. I don't know who will start, but I'm going to assume it's Mr. de Vleger. Please go ahead. 10 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, committee, for the opportunity to appear as part of your updates on the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our presentation will be a little bit narrower than the previous witnesses. We're focusing on the committee's interest in looking at the measures related to temporary and seasonal workers. So on this topic, as you indicated, Mr. Chair, we'll be sharing the opening remarks. I will be outlining the legislative and regulatory framework governing the entry of temporary foreign workers, including new measures put in place in the context of COVID-19. My colleagues from Employment and Social Development Canada will then describe some of the program specifics that apply to the temporary foreign worker program in the agricultural setting, including rules, program guidance, and compliance measures. My colleague from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada will conclude with some remarks on the critical importance of these workers at this time and efforts employers themselves in the sector have made to ensure food supply as well as health and safety for Canadians. Les travailleurs étrangers temporaires représentent une...
Temporary foreign workers represent a significant part of Canada's labour force. This is a field that focuses on demand in the sense that...
I can't hear the I can't hear the translation. It's very fuzzy in its broadcast.
Translation, did you get that?
Hi there, Mr. Chair. It's Michelle in the room. We're not having any technical issues with interpretation here. Could we just verify, I'm sorry, that the member is listening in on the interpretation channel?
Yeah, Mr. Van Bynen, are you on the English channel?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Let's try again. It just came in very, very fuzzy. I don't know if it was the same way with everyone else.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, the same happened for me. I could not understand it. It was very foggy and hard to interpret.
Okay, let's, Mr. De Vlieger, could you just back up half a minute or so and then start from there?
Sure. Les travailleurs étrangers temporaires représentent une part.
Temporary foreign workers represent a significant portion of Canada's labor supply.
We'll continue. Il s'agit pour l'essentiel de.
For the most part, it is a demand-driven area in that employer demand to hire workers on temporary work permits fluctuates and drives the numbers.
Hearing any translation.
Give us a...
Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Hi there. We'll just double check on our end, make sure everything is okay in the room. Give us one moment.
From my perspective, the actual floor conversation was louder, and the translation kind of seemed to overstep it a little bit. So it was harder to hear the translation in that sense.
One moment. We're just speaking with them now.
Seulement pour information,
Just for information purposes,
Please proceed, Mr. De Vleger. If you need to back up a bit, please feel free.
Sure, I'll just back up to the French section here. Les travailleurs étrangers temporaires.
Foreign temporary workers are a significant portion of Canada's labour supply. For the most part, it is a demand-driven area in that employer demand to hire workers on temporary work permits fluctuates. And this demand also drives the numbers required. Last year, 405,000 temporary work permits were issued across a broad range of occupations.
Worker programming. One is the International Mobility Program, which is administered by IRCC, and the other, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, administered by Employment and Social Development Canada, and that one involves a labour market test. The seasonal agricultural workers the committee has signaled an interest in is in this latter category. As members of the committee are aware, travel restrictions on persons seeking to enter Canada from overseas were put in place on March 18th. On March 26th, temporary foreign workers, that is, those holding a valid work permit or who had been issued an approval letter, were added to the list of persons exempted from the travel ban. These bans and exemptions are pursuant to orders issued under the authorities of the Quarantine Act and the Aeronautics Act. These temporary workers, as with all others entering Canada from overseas, are subject to another order under the Quarantine Act, which requires all persons to isolate for 14 days from the day upon which they entered Canada. There are some limited exceptions to this requirement, for example, emergency workers and medical personnel, but seasonal agricultural workers will all need to abide by this 14-day quarantine period. Les travailleurs temporaires qui entrent au Canada sont...
Temporary workers who come into Canada are subject to a vast legislative and regulatory framework based on the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, which controls their selection, their eligibility, and their conformity when it comes to the workers themselves, as well as their employers.
So just a word on the new draft regulations. In the context of the new orders under the Quarantine Act, and with a view to managing the health and safety of workers and Canadians alike, new draft regulations were tabled in Parliament this past Saturday that will provide some specific additional tools. For the workers themselves, these draft regulations import the requirements of complying with Quarantine Act and public health orders, including that they quarantine or isolate themselves upon entry into the country for the 14 days. Failure to comply could result in a finding of inadmissibility and issuance of a removal order. For employers of temporary foreign workers, the proposed rules will require that they not do anything that prevents the worker from complying with the order to quarantine or isolate themselves as workers for that 14-day period upon entering Canada. They will also require that employers provide wages and benefits during the 14-day period. So that is that the quarantine period forms part of the employment period. Additionally, for employers under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program that are required to provide accommodations, not all are, but if we're talking about seasonal agricultural workers, they are, there are additional specific requirements in the proposed rules. I will leave it to my colleagues from Employment and Social Development Canada to describe these new rules and the guidance related to them and to the seasonal agricultural workers. But I will just add for now that employers found not to be complying with these new requirements will be subject to the compliance regime and system of administrative monetary penalties already built into the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations. I will now turn it over to Philippe Massé, but I will look forward to your questions after our presentations. Thank you very much. Merci.
Please go ahead, Mr. Massé.
Apologies. Again, I'm Philippe Massé. Je suis directeur général du programme.
I am the Director General of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. I'm joined by my colleague Tara Cosgrove, Executive Director, responsible for Program Integrity at Service Canada.
Le programme est de permettre aux employeurs d'accéder à des travailleurs étrangers.
The objective of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program is to enable employers... Please note that there seems to have been an interruption in the signal.
Mr. Massé, are you there?
Hello, Mr. McKinnon. It's Michelle in the room. We have apparently lost the connection from Mr. Massé.
Okay, I believe Ms. Cosgrove or Mr. Jargudis, are you able to carry on from this point while we wait for Mr. Massé to rejoin us?
Hi, it's Stephen Jargudis here from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I can go ahead if you so choose. Je remercie le comité de m'avoir invité.
I would like to thank the committee for its invitation to appear here today. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to describe the essential role that temporary foreign workers play in order to maintain Canada's food supply. Agriculture and agri-food depends a great deal on temporary foreign workers because of the lack of labor available in the sector. Last year, the sector recruited approximately 60,000 temporary foreign workers. The vast majority of these workers came from Mexico, Guatemala, and Jamaica. They went to work on about 3,000 farms and agricultural installations in Canada. Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia are the main employers because of the large number of fruit and vegetable farms in these provinces.
Workers work in all agriculture sectors. They play an especially critical role in the vegetable and fruit sector, where they account for over 35% of the labor force. The labor-intensive nature of these operations generally starts in the spring when the seeding and or pruning take place. That is why each April we see such a significant increase in the number of temporary foreign workers arriving in Canada. For example, last spring, over 20,000 workers were granted permits to work in the agriculture sector, and similar numbers were expected this year. Seasonal fish and seafood processing workers also normally arrive by April to coincide with the start of the lobster fishing season. The travel bans in Canada, as well as other source countries like Mexico and Guatemala, have both limited and delayed the arrival of many temporary foreign workers. We are, however, encouraged to see that temporary foreign workers are starting to arrive. We also realize there are many Canadians without work right now, and we're encouraging the sector to use new and existing programs like the Canada Summer Jobs to help fill labor shortages with Canadians. Provinces like Quebec, Ontario, are also actively encouraging domestic workers to seek jobs in the agriculture sector. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada will continue to work closely with the sector as well as with our federal, provincial, and territorial partners, some of who are here with us today, to bring workers to Canada as quickly and as safely as possible to ensure that the appropriate health and safety protocols are being followed after the workers arrive. So in fact, yesterday, Prime Minister Trudeau announced $50 million to help farmers, fish harvesters, and food and seafood processing employers to put in place the measures necessary to follow the mandatory 14-day isolation period required of all workers arriving from abroad. Thank you, and I look forward to any of your questions.
Thank you. Do we have Mr. Massé back yet?
Hi, Mr. Chair. We do not have him.
Okay, thank you. We will carry on with the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Oh, sorry, we just had that. We will carry on with the Department of Industry. Mr. Davies, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Industry Sector, you have 10 minutes. And if we get Mr. Massé back in time, we will let him finish his presentation after this. Thank you. Mr. Davies, please go ahead, 10 minutes.
Mr. Chair, honorable members, je serai bref afin de vous laisser.
I will be brief to ensure that there's a great deal of time left to ask questions. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today.
The outbreak continues to evolve rapidly. In the battle against this virus, Canada's scientists, innovators, and industry are working on multiple fronts to fight the pandemic. On March 20th, the Prime Minister announced Canada's plan to mobilize industry to fight COVID-19. This plan introduced measures to directly support businesses to rapidly scale up production or retool their manufacturing capacity to develop products made in Canada to help meet the needs of the front lines of the healthcare system. Since that time, our department has received over 5,000 offers to help from businesses across Canada. Nous communiquons actuellement avec chacun de
We are currently reaching out to each of these businesses to explore their offers. We have moved forward towards many new partnerships. As a result, Canada is securing the capacity to produce necessary medical equipment and supplies.
For example, we are purchasing critical made in Canada ventilators. We are securing new supply chains to produce medical gowns. We are producing large volumes of disinfectants, and we are producing and procuring surgical and N95 masks. At the same time, we have issued challenges to innovative companies to support research and development on new technologies and products. Mr. Chair, we are also working with the life sciences industry on treatments that will help Canadians who become infected and on vaccine research to provide population-level immunity for all Canadians. In all of these efforts, Canadian researchers and businesses are stepping up to meet this challenge, and we will continue to support them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Still not seeing Mr. Massé. If he comes on later on, we may take a break in the questioning to let him give his presentation. But at this point, we will start our questioning. We will, as noted, we have an agreement amongst all parties for 3 rounds of questions. We will start with Mr. Genereux. 6 minutes, Mr. Genereux, please go ahead.
And just to be clear, Mr. Chair, if the witness does come back on, won't interrupt my question round, or will come subsequent after my round?
Certainly, if that's what you prefer, yes.
Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I want to take my time to highlight how disappointing it is that Bruce Aylward, a Canadian advisor to the WHO, has at the last minute decided not to appear and did not offer to be rescheduled at a later date. Mr. Chair, this is unacceptable. Since December, the WHO has been updating citizens around the globe on COVID-19's impact. First, Dr. Tam didn't make herself available to take questions, and now the WHO is pulling out. This committee has the explicit mandate to, and I quote, meet for the sole purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to take this time to point out some facts that I was hoping Mr. Aylward would be able to address, but being that he has decided not to come and hide from any accountability, I will simply read this into the record. There's absolutely no doubt that the WHO has been slow to recommend concrete measures that has negatively affected Canada's response to the virus. In fact, the WHO has gone above and beyond to congratulate and thank China for their response, which has been to mislead the world on the gravity of the virus. Taiwan, a country who effectively flattened the curve and contained the virus by proactively implementing enhanced border screening measures before China even admitted to having a new disease, is being completely ignored and disregarded by the WHO and Mr. Aylward particularly. I want to highlight some of the evidence that proves the need to have the WHO attend as witnesses and answer questions because their response has affected Canada's response. First, the WHO stated that there is no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission. That statement was used to develop Canada's response in January. Less than 10 days later, the WHO announced that the virus does in fact spread through humans, and yet they still kept the risk assessment the world as moderate. In fact, Dr. Tam used Canada's legal obligation to the WHO as an excuse to not implement travel bans. She said, due to the fact that the WHO does not recommend doing so, we cannot do this for fear of being called out. Our government was more fearful of being called out by the WHO than protecting Canadians. This deserves clarification from both the WHO and Dr. Tam. As the WHO continues to praise China's approach after announcing over 8,000 deaths, Taiwan is producing 4 million masks a day and providing them to frontline workers and consumers for their safety. Again, I remind Canadians that the WHO refuses to include or acknowledge Taiwan's approach. Why was China being listened to and Taiwan being ignored? In the late February, as cases continue to mount and the WHO continues to discourage travel restrictions, and as our government continued to only listen to the WHO, a group of Chinese Canadian doctors urged mandatory quarantine for Chinese travelers in order to contain the virus and not overwhelm Canada's health system. The government refused to listen on those grounds and instead continues to fear being called out by the WHO. It took until March 11th for the WHO to declare a global pandemic. Numerous countries across the world were already seeing a significant rise in cases and the death rate was growing. There was no doubt that the virus didn't respect borders, that was spreading fast, and that there was no cure. Mr. Chair, in March, after Canadians were being told to stay home, after daycares and schools were shutting down across the country, after millions of people started losing their jobs, the government admits that it is now being recommended to close borders and implement mandatory self-quarantine for travelers. Our government started going against the advice of the WHO, even though earlier Dr. Tam suggested legal duties to the WHO. But this is about Mr. Alward and the WHO's refusal to attend our committee today. I'm sure there will be opportunity in the future and at the right time to investigate why this decision was suddenly made, but that's for another time. There is no doubt that there are mounting questions about including Taiwan in the WHO, a subject that Mr. Alward clearly does not want to discuss. There is no doubt that there are mounting questions continued to praise China as evidence grows regarding China's transparency. There is no doubt that there are mounting questions about the WHO's refusal to recommend enhanced border measures and the use of masks. There is no doubt that there are mounting questions about that the WHO will recommend in the future. For example, just a few weeks ago, they stated removing people and families from their homes and quarantining them as a possible scenario. Mr. Chair, this is why I strongly urge you and the clerk to ensure that Mr. Alward makes himself available, that as a Canadian advisor to the WHO and a senior advisor to the Director General of the WHO, he appear before our committee. We're studying the impacts of COVID-19 on Canada and the government's approach, and he should have answers to Canadians' questions. We have serious questions about the WHO's data and who's really making these decisions that are impacting Canadians. This committee is an opportunity to ask questions on the minds of Canadians, and we need to hear from relevant witnesses in order to do just that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll cede the rest of my time.
So, Matt, are you done?
I sure hope you're listening to at least my last comment where I said I'd cede the rest of my time, Mr. Chair.
I'm having some audio issues at my end. My headset kind of went dead, so.
I'll send you the written version, how about?
Okay, I heard most of it, but thank you. We will go then now to Dr. Jaczek. Dr. Jaczek, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I will be trading my spot on the rotation with MP Van Bynen. My questions and comments will be directed to Dr. Attaran. And first of all, Dr. Attaran, so you understand where I'm coming from, I was a local medical officer of health for some 2 decades here in Ontario, and obviously coped with many outbreaks and even during SARS, we were very heavily involved in our health unit. And the leadership that we looked to at the time was for sure a provincial leadership in terms of public health response. I think you can agree that with this pandemic, we really are in an unprecedented situation. And clearly there is a need for a national coordination of public health responses. And thank you for being blunt. We are here as members of the committee to ensure that we listen to people like you, take your good ideas, and move forward in terms of incorporating some of those ideas in this truly unprecedented situation. So I just wanted to ask you about the fact that the Government of Canada did enter into a multilateral information sharing agreement with all provinces and territories in 2016. And that agreement did outline the public health information that must be shared with the federal government in the context of a public health emergency, which is clearly where we are now. So in your view, what types of challenges have there been associated with this sharing of provincial and territorial public health information with the federal government? Could you give us some specific areas where you see that the agreement might need to be tightened up?
Doctor, thank you for your question. I'll be blunt with you back. That agreement should be torn up and replaced with a law, because it's a voluntary agreement which took 1 million years to negotiate after SARS. Doctor, I don't agree with your point of view that this is a unique situation. SARS was very close to being this. And after SARS, the federal government did a lessons learned study late in 2003 that said if the provinces and federal government could not come to an agreement that was effective on information sharing, then Parliament should legislate. That was 2003. The information sharing agreement you're speaking of came 13 years later, much too leisurely, and it still isn't legally binding. So when you have provinces that are slow to deliver information about the epidemic to the federal government, or do so incompletely, or do so in formats that are not compatible with the others, making apples to apples comparisons impossible to do. This is frankly unacceptable, and it has gone on way too long since SARS. I think that information sharing agreement is pretty words. It has not functioned during this epidemic. There are data possessed by the federal government that are not being given to independent scientists to work with. For instance, when the government, when PHAC places in the database a case of a person being hospitalized or a case of a person testing positive for COVID, there's no data released about which province that comes from. The province of origin is censored by PHAC. What that means is it's impossible for scientists to perform analyses that point you to the hot spots. And of course, in an epidemic, it's the hot spots that matter. But if PHAC is going to be slow sharing information from the provinces and then censor it so as to eliminate any evidence of hot spots, frankly, this is, with the greatest of respect, it's incompetent. And it should not be the case in a country as advanced as Canada. I see exquisite location data in the data sets of other countries, for instance, Singapore, but for Canada, it's not there.
Thank you. Are there other areas, apart from data collection, where you have seen the need for greater consistency nationally? I believe you have alluded to self-assessment tools, which might lead to different medical guidance if they vary from province, territory to territory. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Doctor, thanks for the question. You're referring to a study that we released last week with my PhD student, Brianna Libris. As you know, each of the 10 provinces has a self-assessment tool on its health website. And basically that tool asks Canadians, do you have a fever? Do you have difficulty breathing? Have you been traveling? And a variety of questions like that. And depending on what a person inputs into this website, each province has its own. They're all different. The person may be told, you're in big trouble, call 911 right away, or may be told, stay at home, or may be told, contact your family doctor. It depends, province by province. We did a comparison of all 10 provinces. You'd like to see that they're all giving the same medical information, because for certain things, there's really only one medically correct answer. Well, what you get is that that's not the case at all. Each province has created a assessment tool that doesn't match the other provinces. And none of them match the official case definition of COVID from the Public Health Agency or the World Health Organization. This is just incompetent. I mean, I don't have a polite word for it. The right way for the country to be doing this is have a single health assessment tool that representatives of the provinces can agree on, the Public Health Agency of Canada can offer, dans les deux langues officielles, parce que ce sera important.
In both official languages, because it's important to offer it to people in Quebec as well.
This tool can be used by all the provinces. We haven't done that. We're terribly, terribly disunited. And in some cases, that disuniting is probably killing people. In a few provinces, if you use their self-assessment tool and you say, I have a headache, the provinces tell you that's not a COVID symptom. But of course, headache is a COVID symptom. So in some provinces, people are receiving medically incorrect information about the disease. And that could really kill them. It's not something that should be happening.
Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair? I'll just carry on then. Thank you, Dr. Attaran. In terms of epidemic curves in each province, have you looked at the different types of course that we see across the country? Ignoring for now your concerns related to consistency.
Sorry, Dr. Jackson, I apologize. My mic was on mute. I cut you off already. You're well over time.
Thank you.
Nous allons maintenant au Monsieur Perron.
We'll now move on to Mr. Perron. 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Oui, j'ai pas bien entendu. C'est à mon tour.
Yes, I didn't hear quite right. It's my turn?
Oui, c'est à vous.
Yes, you have the floor.
Alors,
Very well, thank you, everyone. I am pleased to be here, and I'd like to thank the witnesses who are here to enlighten us. Clearly, Mr. Attaran has a different point of view and is certainly trying to convey some important information. I would like to talk about temporary foreign workers in agriculture and agri-food, especially about the way the quarantine is planned by the federal government, which is that we've tossed the problem into the yards of the provinces and Quebec. I personally consider that quarantine is a public health safety requirement. It's people who come into the country, therefore it's the federal government's responsibility. We all understand the importance of these workers. They are welcome. They are essential to our food security. However, my question is for people at agriculture and citizenship, or perhaps over at employment. Ms. Cosgrove could perhaps answer the question if Mr. Massé isn't available. This week, decisions were made about how to manage quarantine. Do you believe that it was appropriate to send this problem to under provincial responsibility? Some people are more experienced with recruiting workers than in quarantining them. There's issues of housing and transportation. There's a lot of variables from one place to another. The interpreter regrets, but there seems to be some connectivity issues. My question is, do you believe this is the best way to proceed? Why not centralize quarantines to help agricultural producers who have enough on their shoulders already?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Peut-être que...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, says Mr. de Vliger. I would invite my colleagues to add on if they wish to.
Is a little bit about the roles and responsibilities. I'll say something with respect to the temporary foreign worker program generally, and specifically about the measures being put in place that have been put in place for seasonal agricultural workers. This is work that has been done in close collaboration across orders of government. So both in terms of immigration ministries and public safety ministries, but also agriculture and employment labor ministries at the federal level with provincial counterparts, discussing, certainly from a public health perspective, how to coordinate and making sure that there's alignment with respect to measures for self-isolation and for quarantine. You're right to indicate that at the border, that is a Government of Canada responsibility. In fact, it starts before the border. It starts for those traveling from overseas in the air mode with our Transport Canada colleagues who have protocols in place for screening of travelers when they get on an airplane. So with the advice of the Public Health Agency, informed by WHO advice, for the screening of those persons so that people who are symptomatic.
Excuse, Monsieur Viegar.
Excuse me, sir. You just mentioned that it's the federal government's responsibility when people come into the country. Do you not believe, especially based on Mr. Attaran's proposals, that it's important to have unified measures? Would it not be justified for the federal government to manage quarantine from A to Z when we send employees before we send them to various regions? In Quebec, currently, every region is being isolated from the other. We have hundreds of people who started arriving on the weekend and who are being dispersed into different regions in Quebec with few or little control over quarantine measures.
Oui, merci encore une fois.
Yes, thank you.
The jurisdiction when foreign nationals are entering Canada, and for that period of self-isolation, the quarantine period of 14 days, that's where new orders are in place under the Quarantine Act, so under federal legislation, under the Quarantine Act, and then the measures I described from an immigration perspective that apply to those, not just the foreign nationals, but also to their employers during that 14-day period, so that the self-isolation protocols are enforced and that there's compliance done on those. You'd spoken earlier about transportation and how centers of quarantine happen. Perhaps my colleague from Employment and Social Development might be able to comment on some of those measures that are in place that handle the transit.
Nous les avons, oui.
We have them, yes. Thank you. We have measures. We all have measures. Employers have space to distance employees, and every area has to be disinfected daily. We think it's reasonable for producers to take care of that aspect. Thank you.
Je pense que mon collègue Steve
I think my colleague Steve from Agriculture can talk about the new measures and funding for employers that were just announced yesterday, I believe. Steve?
Je pourrais ajouter simplement qu'on...
Yes. I would like to add that there are funds available for employers to set up necessary measures. And this will be shared with all employers. We're in contact with other organizations that organize transportation and housing. That's being done in Quebec with UPA and MAPAC. We're working with the government of Quebec to find solutions to help them with those aspects.
Ne trouvez-vous pas qu'il est déraisonnable
Thank you, Mr. Perron. Your time is up.
Mr. Davies, I see we now have Mr. Massé has rejoined us. I'd like to give him an opportunity to do his presentation, if that's okay, before you're around. Okay.
Of course.
Mr. Massé, would you like to take a couple minutes and do your presentation? Monsieur Massé, do you hear me?
Yes, I can. Just muting, and apologies for the technical problems. Tel que mentionné, est-ce que vous pouvez m'entendre?
Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, go ahead.
So as I was saying, I'm joined by my colleague Tara Cosgrove of the Integrity Services at Service Canada. Et tel que déjà mentionné, lorsqu'il est la question de
When it comes to food security, for Canadians, the government recognizes that the agriculture and food processing sectors play a vital role. That is why the government exempted these workers from the travel ban that was enacted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Approximately 50 to 60,000 foreign workers come to Canada each year to support our agricultural, food, and fish processing sectors. This represents more than 60% of all foreign workers entering Canada under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. To ensure the timely arrival of these workers, the government has taken steps to reduce the administrative burden for employers and process their applications.
Some of the measures that are being put in place to ensure the health and safety of Canadians, as well as the safety of the workers and present the virus. I won't go over some of the requirements around accommodations. I think the member previously outlined some of those. I've noted some of the questions regarding the approach that's being taken to date. So currently, we're following the advice of public health officials, and we certainly have actively sought guidance from them. And we're continuing to communicate with employers and other stakeholders to provide them with information and assistance. So we've developed and we've shared guidance to employers to make clear their roles and responsibilities. The Ministers of Health and the Ministry of Employment and Workforce Development and Disability have sent correspondence to employers to outline expectations. And we have posted a series of facts online that will be updated on a regular basis. As outlined by my colleague Matt earlier on, these measures would be complemented by strengthened regulatory compliance regime for employers, including monetary penalties for non-compliance. And a non-compliant employer could be banned from hiring workers in the future, depending on the circumstance. So we will look to enforce compliance and ensure that employers respect new requirements through timely inspections. In addition, individuals who observe suspected non-compliance will be able to report through an online portal or a confidential tip line. So the department is finalizing its approach to this inspections and will communicate it in the coming days. So we're going to continue to have proactive communications and engagement with all of the stakeholders, and it's expected that most employers will understand and comply with the requirements related to the spread of COVID. And through these discussions, it's been evident that everyone shares a common objective to keep everyone in Canada, including foreign workers, safe and healthy. And through our collective efforts, we continue to ensure that the sector has access to labor to ensure food security for Canadians. This is a rapidly moving situation. We're adjusting according to advice of public health as it goes along. And if new requirements are needed or felt that be placed, then we would continue to adjust and work proactively with stakeholders to best address the emerging issues. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. We will now continue with our first round with Mr. Davies. Go ahead, Mr. Davies. 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Dr. Adoran, last week, the federal government supposedly released its modeling to Canadians. And I want to quote your words. You said, quote, Dr. Tam produced a so-called epidemiological model last week that was extremely scientifically incomplete and wrong. I'd like to ask you about that. Could you sort of explain your comments to the committee for us, please?
Sure. And my comments are in the context of the strategy I presented, that the only way to go forward from here is to carve one giant wave that will just bury us into a number of wavelets that are much smaller. That's what we're going to have to do as a country. And what Dr. Tam's model, the PHAC model, got fatally wrong was to present that this would not necessarily be the case, that there would be no deliberate carving up like this. The model she presented, which, by the way, was very secretive because she didn't disclose the methodology, she didn't disclose the data that went into the model, she didn't disclose the mathematical assumptions behind the model. All she presented was the results. That's not how real scientists work. The model she presented portrayed that if we managed a high degree of social isolation, that no more than 10% of the Canadian population would ever become infected with the virus, and then the epidemic would peter away on its own by the fall. This is absolutely, positively wrong. And it's wrong for the reasons that I explained in my opening, that all of us, nearly all of us, probably 99% or something like this, have not met the virus and have not developed immunity to it. And so if you open up, a very large percentage of us are going to get the virus, not just 10% in PHAC's estimation. And the mathematical model that I wish to share with you, by the way, the final version has gone on the website while we've been talking. That mathematical model from scientists at the University of California, Berkeley, University of California, San Francisco, Imperial College, London, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and me at the University of Ottawa, what that model says is that when you release social distancing, when you release the isolation, you will get another big climb that you must manage so it doesn't explode. That's what I mean by having a little curvelet. And you'll have subsequent curvelets after that. And that this is something that has to play out until not just 10% of Canada's population has been exposed. It doesn't peter away automatically like that, as PHAC seems to suggest. It's going to be somewhere around half the population that has to be exposed, perhaps more.
Okay, Dr. Adder, if I could jump in there. Now, you've made some pretty strong comments. You've, to use your words again, you've said, speaking about Minister Hajdu and Dr. Tam, you said, worse, they are concealing data and interfering with scientists to solving the problem. And you also stated PHAC censors the data before it's disclosed to scientists. I want to ask you a question about the Office of the Chief Science Advisor of Canada, which was established by the Trudeau government in 2017. It says on their website that the Office of the Chief Science Advisor of Canada is committed to ensuring that government science is fully available to the public. In your view, is the government meeting that commitment? And have we heard anything from the Chief Science Advisor of Canada to date on the COVID-19?
Oh, goodness, no. Oh, goodness, no. I mean, the Chief Science Advisor of Canada is Dr. Mona Nemer. She's been almost completely missing in action. I think probably most members of the committee don't even know that Canada has a Chief Science Advisor, but it does. If you look at her website, the last statement she made publicly, the last official statement, was August of last year. She hasn't said much of anything on COVID. And that to me shows a great deal of what's wrong with the treatment of science in government. That there's a Chief Science Advisor we haven't heard of who hasn't been active on this matter. Now, it goes beyond that, Mr. Davies, and the problem at the Public Health Agency of Canada is that Dr. Tam is not really independent. I reviewed the documents that the government disclosed to this committee. I believe you got them about a week ago, is that right? And I've reviewed them, and what I see is that on February 3rd and February 10th this year, there were teleconferences between all the federal, provincial, and territorial health ministers, but Dr. Tam's comments were scripted for her. She was not able to speak as an independent public health officer, and that is just wrong. I mean, one of the things that was scripted for her is to say that the level of risk within Canada is low. That was in the February 3rd set of talking points.
Dr. Adder, I'm just going to squeeze in one last quick question here before my time's up. In March 27th, in Maclean's, you said this. You said, some provinces are sabotaging social distancing for their pet industries. Ontario has declared all manufacturing and construction is essential, as if all goods are in equal demand and quarantined Ontarians cannot live without home renovations. Alberta considers the oil sands essential, and tens of thousands of employees from across Canada are stuffed into work camps that are superb incubators for acquiring and then dispersing infection and death to every corner of the country. I've heard you say that if we can lock down half-heartedly and wait months, or we can do it ferociously and punch through in a couple of weeks. I've heard you talk about the need for us to have national data collection and sharing. Is it your view that the federal government should invoke its powers under the Emergencies Act so that we can have national data collection and national standards on quarantine and social distancing?
Well, yes. I mean, first, the good news. We probably have, as a country, crested on the number of infections. And that is something that our model presents, the one that I sought to place before the committee today. But that doesn't mean we're over. As I said, this is a very long process because we have to all come out of isolation now. For us to do that safely, absolutely you should use emergency powers, whether it's under the Emergencies Act or whether it's a private member's bill under the emergency and quarantine power. I don't care how you do it, that forces more epidemiological information to be shared and made public, because each step in reopening must be carefully planned. The metaphor is you are behind a barricade from a very deadly threat outside. Do you just fling open the door and stroll right out? No, you plan how you're going to do it. And to plan it well, you want scientific guidance on when and how many people in what parts of the country can reinsert themselves into day-to-day life. If you follow a staged, planned reentry plan, you will find the economy is going faster, deaths are fewer. But scientists are unable to make this without transparent data. And if you have to use the Emergencies Act for that or separate emergency legislation, do it by yesterday. It is beyond urgent. Or we just cannot help you get the best plan to safety out there and worked on.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. That brings our first round to a close. We start now our second round with Mr. Albus. Mr. Albus, 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for your expertise, your presence here, and the work you do for Canadians. I would first like to start by questioning ESDC. Are you continuing to process labor market impact assessments at this time?
Thank you for your question. The answer, quick answer is yes. So with the lifting of the travel ban, it was affecting all of the all temporary foreign workers were exempted from that travel ban, and so we are accepting applications for all sectors at this moment. That being said, we are prioritizing those in the agriculture and agri-food sector as a priority, and we're examining the impact of course, the current labor market situation on how new applications can be assessed.
Besides seasonal agricultural workers or temporary foreign workers for the ag stream, what other kinds of industries are you continuing to process LMIAs?
I don't have recent figures, unfortunately, in terms of the intake that we've had since.
Can I ask you to please submit that to the committee?
Absolutely, we can.
Thank you. My next question is on the announcement of $1,500 per worker for the purposes of quarantine. I want to say that I agree with the member from the Bloc Québécois that this is a federal responsibility. In my area in West Kelowna, we've seen an outbreak at a well-respected local nursery. And I believe that if we had tighter border controls to watch out for this and these kinds of rules quite a while ago, we probably would be able to avoid the damage to that business and to the local economy. Now, I would simply just ask the question. Originally, when the Prime Minister discussed this and the Minister at first put this out, it was going to be for quarantining specifically when people first came into the country. Now it sounds like it's going to be a $1,500 subsidy that there may not be transparency as to whether or not the full amount of time has gone on, or whether it happens immediately at the border. Could you please explain?
Yeah, so it's a couple things. Thanks for the question. So right now we're still in the process of finalizing the details of the program, but the intention is that there will be $1,500 per worker. But one of the requirements to receive the funding is that employers will have to be not found to have been in contravention of the quarantine requirements. In other words, if an employer is found at some point to not have followed the quarantine requirements that are currently in place, they will not have access to the funding. So that will
Wait
happen.
a second here. Just again, in regards to the $1,500, it's for a very specific purpose, to quarantine. Are you saying that we're expecting employers just simply, the whole measure, from my understanding, was to ensure public safety? Who will be monitoring that this actually happens and that the full 14 days are followed?
I might leave it to one of my colleagues to talk a little bit more about the enforcement portion of that. I would just sort of reiterate that $1,500 that is available per worker is to help with the additional costs. So that would include salary as well as quarantine provisions for that 2-week period.
So you have just mentioned that this is to help with cost. Are any of your departments, whether it be Ag or ESDC, concerned that right now we have millions of Canadians that are unemployed? I have young people that are coming on to the workforce and there are no jobs for them. And yet we are essentially giving a $1,500 subsidy that lowers the cost for someone to utilize a seasonal agricultural worker, temporary foreign worker, versus a Canadian that is out without work. Are you concerned by what signal that is sending to the Canadian people that are without a job at this time?
Sure, I can start with a response to that as well. So within the domain of agriculture, it has been proven necessary over quite a number of years that temporary foreign workers are required. This year, even with these additional provisions in place, it's certainly not going to be possible to get all of the temporary foreign workers in that would be required within agriculture. So we are looking at other initiatives as well and working with provinces and territories.
Well, I hope so, sir, because the reality is we have millions of Canadians that are without work. And so I heard in your specific testimony earlier in your opening statement that you started bringing up last year's numbers. Last year and this year, when it comes to labor markets, are like night and day. And I would go back to Mr. Massey, because Mr. Massey, you said you're still processing LMIAs right now. Why would we be processing LMIAs right now that are based on information that is completely out of date? We have millions of Canadians without jobs. Why would your department continue to process those at this time?
Thanks for your question. As I mentioned, the travel ban did not restrict foreign workers from entering the country to only agriculture. It's open to everyone. Of course, the labor market has changed. Our assessment process includes checks for the labor market situations. Employers must demonstrate that there's a genuine need and that they can genuinely fill that need. In some occupations, there are specialized skills that Canada does not have, even in the context.
So instead of processing these applications, why is your department not immediately phoning employers who right now need cash and say, this, the labor force survey we just did and the unemployment numbers have made this LMIA moot. Do you still need this position? Can we connect you with a Canadian that has recently applied for EI to be able to fill these positions? Why are you not doing that?
Well, like I said, we're adjusting to the current situation and responding to a number of pressures. And this is something we're looking into in terms of how we manage intake into the program going forward. Like I mentioned, the decision didn't restrain employers from applying, and we're assessing how we can better address those situations. And I take your point and suggestion about more proactively reaching out to connect to Canadians as well. It's already part of our assessment. The employers must demonstrate how they've connected with, in particular, underrepresented groups in the economy.
I believe that most people are going to work very hard to be able to meet the quarantine. Oh, well, sir, can I just finish this question?
You're already a minute and a half over, but be very, very.
Okay. Well, the question is that when we have ESDC guidelines for quarantine, now let's just say the workers have all gone through quarantine. They're happily working on the farm, but when they go to get groceries, they contract the virus. Who is responsible now for overseeing that particular issue if there is a community outbreak such as what has happened in West Kelowna? Will it be the provincial government that will have to take responsibility, or will it be the federal government that will have to take responsibility for the situation?
So the federal responsibility for health requirements as it applies to foreign workers or foreign nationals covers the 2-week quarantine period. After the 2-week period, it's the responsibility of local public health officials. So in terms of
people getting sick,
Mr. Albus,
then it's up
more
to the
questions,
province.
please. You're already 4.5 minutes over, 3.5 minutes over.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. We go now to Ms. Sidhu. Ms. Sidhu, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, all the panel, providing important information. I just want to let you know this is the first government who has the mandate letter. Mandate letter, when Prime Minister gave to the ministers, they are setting the responsibilities. According to the mandate letter, I was just reading it, letter to work, the minister to see the responsibilities, and especially to the health minister, you will lead to the government work to strengthen the public work. I know this is very tough time. We all know we all have to work together. And when Prime Minister said in the mandate letter to Minister of Health to work with all the minister with the innovation, before that I go there, I just want to tell Mr. Aderon, I was pleased to see our Chief Science Advisor on CBC earlier this month, Dr. Mona Nemer, has been instrumental in working with developing the COVID-19 expert panel and all the COVID-19 we are all going through. I just want to ask CIHR the question. I know on the March 6th, there's a $25 million we're giving to research and 275 addition to the giving to the research. How far we are developing the vaccine, and how we are working, our scientists is working, our researchers are working with the other international community. Are they participating and collaborating with the international community? I just want to ask Dr. Strong, or I said anyone can give me the update.
Thank you very much from the honourable member. That's excellent questions. Right off the top, one of the initiatives that we've been doing throughout the course of all this has been a highly integrated approach across various ministries to deal with this. And so specifically in the area of vaccines, working very closely with ICED as well as NRC on the development. Canada has world-leading expertise within the National Research Council on the development of vaccines and scaling up. And so much of the funding that you saw released by this government of the 275 was really towards developing the industrial response so that Canada would have the capacity to provide therapeutics when and if they were available, and specifically in the area of vaccines on that. And I'll come back to that in just a second. With respect to the funding that went out into the Rapid Response Program, it was across a broad range of research approaches that was informed by working with our international colleagues so that we were aware and continue to be very well aware and interlinked on the international front with initiatives being brought forward. So for instance, on the vaccines, to return to the core of your question with that, there are a number of different vaccines and different approaches that are available worldwide and being looked at this moment. As we begin to look at scaling up for the ones that are the most promising in trials, we will be part of international consortia on those with the ability to actually produce them in Canada.
Thank you. And over the weekends...
It's Professor Attaran. Since you addressed a remark to me, could I please answer, Mr. Chair?
Just after that, I just want to ask this question. Over the weekend, Spartan Biosense portable test kit, Spartan Q, was approved by Health Canada. Do you think how this rapid testing will help flatten the curve?
So thank you very much for that question. And that's an initiative that received considerable funding over the course of years to develop that technique and was able to rapidly tool it forward. There is no doubt, particularly as we start to talk about this issue of how do you reopen the communities after we come through this first wave, that direct testing in rapid timelines is going to be critical so that we know what the load is within the environment as we begin to release the social distancing component. So it's a very important advance for us to be able to do that in the half hour that testing comes forward with. There are several other initiatives that are also being funded currently to do exactly the same, but by different avenues so that we have it covered. So it's a very important advance that will be of assistance to us, particularly as we start to come out of this.
Thank you.
Listen, I would like to answer. It's Professor Attaran because my name was used and a comment was made.
It's Ms. Sadu's time. It's up to her to use it as she pleases.
Sure, but I did hear a comment addressed to me, Mr. Chair, and if my name is going to be used, I do feel the need to respond.
No, you can
Will
talk,
I have time to do that?
You can give the answer, but I just want to give the mandate letter is just a responsibility. How it's the first government who declare that, and it's a responsibility how the minister can work. And when they are talking about how the letter to the minister, how they lead to the government work to strengthen the public health. So this is very pandemic situation. We are all going through very tough situation, and we all have to work together. We have to find the solution. And I know we start early government response to COVID-19. And today we are just seeing our researchers what can we do more to do more to bend the curve or to flank the curve. This is just my 2 cents, and you can give any advice on that too.
Thank you. And look, my advice is going to be, let's not try to be dishonest about the past. It has not been a priority of any Canadian government, and I say this equally of conservative as liberal governments, to prepare for pandemics. After SARS, we had a very clear warning, and we had a national study on lessons learned. Nearly all the recommendations from that report weren't implemented. And with respect to the mandate letters, no, it is actually not correct that any of the mandate letters, it's actually not correct that any of the mandate letters mention pandemic preparedness at all.
This is not a partisan issue. How we can flank the curve? Let's give advice to how we can flank the curve. So if we can work together, or the vaccine, how the vaccine is working, that kind of the CIHR can do more for the public research, for PPE. That's what, if you can give advice on that.
Ms. Sadu, I'm going to cut you off there.
Thank you.
We're well over time. We go now to Ms. Rempel-Garner. Ms. Rempel-Garner, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Ms. Michelle, I think you're muted.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks. Sorry, just a bit of a delay. All of my questions are directed to Mitch Davies, the representative the Department of Industry has designated to answer our questions today. So, Mr. Davies, as you can imagine, many Canadians are wondering how their life can get back to some level of normalcy. So I'm wondering if the government or any official internal to your department has directed your department to prepare or participate in any kind of formally structured federal government-led national economic relaunch strategy that includes staged and safe lifting of mass isolation measures.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. In addition to the work I referenced in my opening comments in terms of moving Canada's industrial capacity to address the immediate needs to produce critical equipment, it's also important that obviously we look to when the economy is going to return and what conditions will be required. Again, those matters are under the care and responsibility of the public health experts. But certainly there are areas where innovation, technology, and the deployment of the right
Mr.
responses.
Davies,
yes?
Mr. Davies, I have a very short period of time. So I'm wondering, my specific question was, have you been directed to participate in a formal strategy to relaunch the economy? Many other countries already have this type of a panel put together. And today the Prime Minister wasn't clear on his answer. So I'm wondering if the government or any department official internal to your department has directed your department to begin work on a formal framework for this.
Thank you for the questions. We in our department are working with the Department of Finance.
Mr. Davies, I'm not hearing you. I'm wondering if you're speaking loudly enough.
I do have it off mute. Apologies. Can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
Still not hearing you.
It was working. Can you hear me now?
I can hear him, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
okay, fair enough.
Apologies. So I was just providing an answer that in the department, we're working with the Department of Finance, with the Department of Health, with the Public Health Agency of Canada, in looking into the issue that's been raised by the honourable member, which is obviously recovery and return to work. And working jointly with those departments on the strategies that will get us forward into that.
Is there a formal framework, though, is there a formal framework for this that the committee could review?
Mr. Chair, I do not have a formal document or framework that I would introduce at this time. It is a conversation that's very much ongoing in the Government of Canada.
Thank you. I'll now ask some questions with regard to a National Post article that reported that the federal government is undertaking efforts to assist provinces in preparing contact tracing systems related to COVID-19. Has the government or any official internal to your department directed your department to prepare advice to the government on potential privacy issues related to utilizing individual testing data and contact tracing as part of a strategy to begin lifting mass isolation measures?
Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar personally with any specific information related to the question raised by the honourable member. It could also be a question posed to the Public Health Agency of Canada or Health Canada in respect of health data of Canadians, which is not a matter under our direct responsibility.
Your department actually has responsibility for managing PIPEDA and as such oversight of the Privacy Commissioner. So I'll ask, has your department given the minister any advice regarding the concept, has the government or any official internal to your department directed your department to prepare advice to the government on how to mitigate potential privacy issues related to using cell phone location data as part of a COVID-19 contact tracing system?
Mr. Chair, I would take the question of the honourable member on advisement and return with information to the committee to answer the question. It's not an area in my responsibility in charge of the industry sector that I have a direct awareness of or information. I could provide the information follow up to the committee.
Okay, you are the member who has been provided by the industry committee to answer our questions, and there's a lot of concern in the public about this right now. So has your government or has the government or any official internal to your department directed your department to work with any private sector technology providers to assist in developing COVID-19 contact tracing systems? And if so, has your department has the department directed you or anyone else to begin negotiating the terms of individual data usage with these companies?
So, Mr. Chair, I am aware of a number of companies and offers from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector to assist the government, particularly in the area of supporting contact tracing, use of data. There's actually already offers that are available through the private sector with anonymized data in that regard. That is my awareness of that question. I think if there were specifics on any legal or other policy work that relates to the question raised by the member, we'd be pleased to provide that information. And I apologize.
I'm just wondering
at hand.
I'm just wondering how you can be aware of the government working with private sector entities to develop contact tracing methodology that uses individual data, yet not be prepared to come to committee to answer whether or not the government has directed you to start to address or certainly come up with mitigation strategies related to privacy issues that might be related to that type of work. It just seems odd to me.
Mr. Chair, I'm in charge of the industry sector in the department, so I don't have responsibility in my group for the framework legislation for PIPEDA for the specific matter that's been raised by the honourable member. I obviously will endeavour to take that question back to our department to ensure that it's properly addressed.
Are you aware of any work that your government or your department might have done, any advice that's been provided to the government with regard to how to mitigate violations of individual privacy in a contact tracing scenario?
Ms. Rempel-Garner,
I just like the end of my question. Well, everyone else got the end of their questions. No, that was the stall for a technical issue. I'm timing it. Whatever, you can cut me off. That's fine.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the question and the importance of the question, and I apologize not having a specific area responsibility where I could provide more information, but I certainly will endeavor to ensure that that is provided as a follow-up to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rempel-Garner. We go now to Dr. Pawlowski. Dr. Pawlowski, 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. A couple things in response to Matt Generou's point about the WHO not showing up. I too share the disappointment that didn't happen, although perhaps for different reasons, and I hope maybe we can reschedule them. As to Dr. Adarand's comments and his urging us to enact urgent legislation requiring the province and the federal government to share data information and make that information transparent. I think it was well said and point well taken. I hope we can get your modeling as soon as possible, and perhaps we can ask you at a later date to appear again before the committee after looking at that modeling. Now, my questions are really to Dr. Strong and the Canadian Health Institute for Health Research. Now, you did admirably well in making this contest and opening it to academics across the country in order to come up with their proposals for projects related to COVID-19. I think they were given 8 days, and it was phenomenal that you managed to get that done so quickly. And now all these proposals came in, and I see they concentrate on some certain themes, like there's, I think, 13 different projects looking at rapid diagnostic kits. There's a whole bunch looking at protease inhibitors as a form of treatment. And there's a whole bunch of groups, each taking on a different approach. So you're funding like a bunch of horses in a horse race. Now, it seems to me that's the way that science is generally done. It's a kind of competition, and the first horse getting across the line wins. But obviously here it would be advantageous for the different groups to cooperate. We don't care which horse wins. We just want one of the horses to get across the line first. And again, that might require some cooperation and to speed up the process of science, because the process of science, I think, is by its nature a little bit slow. So you do studies and then you have those studies published, and the information is disseminated to the community, the scientific community. They go to conferences. This generates more studies. It all takes time. But again, we don't have a lot of time. And so, for example, with the rapid diagnostic test kits, I would imagine there are a bunch of hurdles that are required for any group trying to come up with such kits. Now, one group may be able to get over that first hurdle rather easily, but stall on the second and third hurdle. Whereas another may stall on the first hurdle, but be able to get over the second and third hurdles fairly quickly. So it would be useful to require those different groups in order to share the information. Now, there was some mention of real-time sharing between some of the organizations. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about how you're trying to get those different groups to coordinate and share their knowledge to try to get us to the end point as soon as possible.
Mr. Chair, I thank the honourable member for the question. It's indeed quite timely. We've already begun the process of which he speaks, and he is quite accurate that it would be nice to have, I don't care what horse it is, the first one over the line, but what we want to make sure is that everybody is pushing their horses together to get across. And so we have developed a number of knowledge translation venues, already having done 2 of these where we bring together in a virtual manner like this, those teams, and it was part of the grants that they had to do this together to have these discussions about where are you in the course of this. Very important to us also was where are the hurdles, as you've described them. It's very apropos. Where are the hurdles that you are running into that are slowing your process down, and what can we as a CIHR do to help move those along further with it? So it is happening very much in real time. It is, as you say, it is a different way to do research as an investigator. We are forcing sharing of data in real time and modifications to be made in real time based on that sharing. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that was good. The other thing is, what can you do to ensure that in this process, so for example, a protease inhibitor and a bunch of different groups are looking at that as a possible form of treatment. I think in the normal course of things, this may lead to someone patenting the medication and then it being on the market. And then obviously there's restrictions on the use of the product because it's under patent. So will anything that comes out of this research be subject to normal rules of patent, or is there some way that we can guarantee this is for the benefit of all Canadians?
Thank you very much for the question. It's an important one, and it's actually a worldwide question as well, too, because there are over 400 different studies going on in the world right now, looking at a whole variety of different things in there for it. So this concept of making sure that if we do have a discovery, let's take a protease inhibitor as you've exemplified there, and it shows that it has efficacy, the way that these studies have been designed and the funding moved forward, it would be that this would move forward rapidly to scale up. Without having to worry about the IP protection component in there. Obviously, some point down the road, yes, there's going to have to be a conversation around that, but not in the midst of a pandemic to move it along with that. We are looking very carefully and critically with our governmental partners right now about what this next phase will look like, because what we have funded through the first phase will identify those extremely promising candidates. Now we need to move to the next phase, and that's where that work is happening as we speak.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Thank you. We go now to Monsieur Perron. Monsieur Perron, c'est à vous. 2 minutes et demie.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Mr. Perron, you have the floor. 2.5 minutes. Yes, thank you. I'd like to come back to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. These are essential workers that have experience. It's not that we want to refuse them entry, it's that we want to welcome them adequately. Mr. Attaran, at a time when we are imposing serious restrictions on Quebec's regions where we have housing and infrastructure that is not adapted for quarantine, the interpreter regrets, but there are connectivity issues and the question needs to be repeated. Do you believe?
Je crois que le fédéral devrait gérer du début à la fin les 40 ans.
Est-ce que je peux vous demander de répéter la question parce que
Could you please repeat the question because I lost the audio for a few seconds?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Attaran. Mr. Perron, if you could please do the question again. I'll start your clock over. It's
On va recommencer ça.
It's a problem with translation.
Alors, Monsieur Attaran, je recentrais d'abord le débat sur...
Monsieur Attaran, I'd like to focus on temporary foreign workers who are ensuring our food security. They're experienced, they're effective, we need them. The issue is not to restrict their entry, but we need to admit them correctly. Earlier, I talked about the concerns for public safety of imposing quarantine on the backs of farmers in the private sector who have infrastructure that's not well adapted, who don't have the experience to do this, and then we're threatening to fine them and even to imprison them. This is all on the backs of producers. Do you believe that this is the way to proceed? Would it not be preferable for the federal government to manage the process of quarantining people from beginning to end to ensure everyone's safety? Answer: I agree almost 100% with you. We know very well that farmers, dairy farmers, are not public health experts. If we leave this heavy task on the backs of our farmers, we will almost certainly have problems. By problems, I mean threats to public health. For me, that's unacceptable. We know that our Constitution indicates that quarantining travelers is a responsibility that rests on the shoulders of the federal government. Section 91 of our Constitution indicates that if the federal government does not have the means to impose quarantine, at least we can manage quarantine with the help of provinces. But management has to be federal because the responsibility under our Constitution is at the federal level as well. Question: if we say that we don't have the means to do it, should we not find the means to do this before we spend billions everywhere and sink further into debt when this is an issue of public safety? This is the very first wave. We have to think about the impact on subsequent years. In British Columbia, it's the image of those workers over the next several years that might be affected, and they're essential to our economy. Answer: you're entirely correct. Your colleague from the Conservative Party said that we cannot simply give $1,500 to farmers to manage all that. It's impossible. When I talk about resources, I'm talking about technical resources, not just money.
Effectivement.
Merci, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Perron.
We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, 2.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. To Dr. Strong, Doctor, on April 2nd, CIHR announced that as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic, the Spring 2020 project grant competition has been canceled. I'm just wondering, given the vital importance of research, obviously when we're undergoing a pandemic and having a health crisis, I'm curious whether you think that canceling funding for urgently needed research funding is a wise decision.
I thank the honourable member for the question. What was cancelled was the spring project competition. There are two a year, one in the fall, one in the spring. And when that decision was made, several things were intersecting with each other. The first one is that we were in the beginnings of what we knew would have to be a government-wide response to this, and to focus our research capacity on the COVID-19 component of this, hence the rapid research component, others that we're doing as we speak for that. We also recognized that this was a time when all of the resources of the CIHR would be focused solely on that, to do that. And that's to try and conduct a competition of reviewing 2,500 applications using 1,000 reviewers in real time was going to not be possible given all the other parts that we had to do. Looking forward, though, it's going to be critical. We are working now and have been working with our partners across the government to find a package to ensure that those researchers who were affected by that and whose research is in fact on hold will be carried through on this and be ready to fully come back into the broader range of research come the fall.
Dr. Strong, if I might, is it not true, though, that the majority of CIHR funding is dispensed through the project grant competition? So really what's been canceled is really the majority of what gets funded.
So the answer is correct that the majority of our funding is through the project competition, but we use an encumbrance system so that of the funding that would have been available to use in this specific competition, that was already around 240 million of it already encumbered in research that is ongoing and funded fully. It has to be on hiatus because universities are closed and the labs are closed without that. All the residual dollars that we had, we moved forward into supporting researchers during the transition.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Massey or Ms. Cosgrove, after 14 migrant workers at a Kelowna, BC nursery recently tested positive for COVID-19. Advocates are warning of a, to use their words, potential disaster if more isn't done to protect the rights of temporary foreign workers through the COVID-19 pandemic. What steps is the federal government taking to ensure that all temporary foreign workers have full access to health care where they're in Canada, both for their protection and the protection of the general public?
Thank you for your question. So there's a couple of aspects to this. The first one is important to understand that all workers, when they arrive in Canada, if they don't directly have access to provincial territorial health systems, there is coverage that must be provided by the employer to bridge any gap. There are often waiting periods. And then you'll see in many provinces like Ontario and British Columbia, they've extended coverage for workers, arriving at day one. In terms of what's happened, and we've talked about what happens during the quarantine period and what happens after. The federal responsibility is for the quarantine period. That being said, following the quarantine period, all workers do have access to provincial health care. Employers are required to maintain their responsibility to provide suitable housing when workers get sick and ensure that they are self-isolated. They must contact the local health authority so they have access to the right care. And so the responsibility for the employer will need to be maintained and supported throughout the stay of the worker. And we continue to work with all the partners to ensure that those elements are working well together. And so it needs to happen throughout the stay. And from what I've seen from the current situations is the health authorities are doing their role and employers are collaborating and the workers are getting the health care that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. That brings our second round to an end. On commence maintenant avec le troisième.
We will now start with a third round. 5 minutes.
Monsieur Leau.
Monsieur Leau?
You're muted, I think.
Oui, je m'excuse.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is that it's clear for all temporary foreign workers who come into Canada to respect the 14-day quarantine. My question's for the Department of Agriculture. The subsidy that was announced per worker yesterday, could we not use those funds to isolate all of those workers in the same place, which would reduce risk? I think that would have been a lot simpler. My question's for the Department of Agriculture.
Oui, merci pour la question.
Yes, thank you for the question. As I said, this announcement is intended to help employers to ensure the safety of workers.
Les provinces et les groupes qui organisent.
We're also having discussions with provinces and groups that organize the arrival of workers from abroad. When it comes to the system in place, we need
les travailleurs ici au Canada le plus tôt que possible.
We need to ensure that people can work in Canada as soon as possible. Question. When it comes to applying the rules in a very real way, people arrived in Quebec on Saturday. These foreign workers arrived and businesses do not yet have all the information about the rules they have to follow and who's going to follow up on following those rules other than whistleblowing. I think it's important for our workers who are coming from abroad and all of the people who are in the area where these workers have to be that we have accurate information. Answer. Yes, of course, it's important to have more information, but we shared all the information about the rules
à faire afin de le...
We've also shared information about the ways to implement them. We've had discussions, and we've shared information with different groups and employers.
Somme toute, je pense que ça aurait été beaucoup plus simple.
I think it would have been a lot simpler to take that subsidy and use it for that 14-day quarantine period when workers arrive in Canada. I have another safety question. When it comes to federal inspectors here in Quebec, in slaughterhouses, and there are slaughterhouses elsewhere in Canada, who have seen that there is a certain hesitancy of inspectors to go and do their work. It's important to ensure everyone's safety and our food safety. For these inspectors, what measures has the Department of Agriculture taken to ensure that inspectors are present where they need to be? Answer: unfortunately, I can't comment on that. That's under the responsibility of the Canada Food Inspection Agency. I would very much appreciate getting information from the agency. It's important. There have been cases that in the last few weeks, there are inspectors who have refused to come into work. There's a lot of fears. Here in Quebec, there are some slaughterhouses where they had to be closed because there was contamination, because the staff was infected with the COVID-19 virus. We need to ensure that we have a very clear policy on keeping inspectors in place to ensure that work can continue. Answer: I know that there are norms and standards in place, but I am not in a position to elaborate. I can certainly consult with my colleagues to provide more information. Answer: thank you. That's the end of my questions.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Liu.
Now to Mr. Van Bynen, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off with a phrase that my father told me, and that was, people who value themselves by their ability to diminish others will forever live in the darkness of their own shadows. Mr. Chair, I've listened to an awful lot of conversation here, and I think there was absolutely no use for some of the derogatory comments that I've heard in this dialogue. And I think this committee should focus on positive comments, constructive dialogue, and seeking out opportunities in the future. So having said that, I'd like to turn to the Canadian Institute for Health and Research. Last month, there was a $27 million grant to support research across Canada focused on COVID outbreak. Now, I'd like to ask Dr. Strong, can you explain what kind of work is being done by Canadian researchers?
Thank you very much to the honourable member for the question. I'm very happy to do that. There are 99 projects which have been funded across this country for specifically research on COVID-19. They can be broken down into a couple of categories. The two major ones are really medical intervention, and then the second one is really with respect to the social side of the equation. So on the medical intervention side, there are four broad categories. Vaccines, so there are 6 studies in working at novel approaches to developing a vaccine for it. There were 12 projects on diagnostics. There are another 9 projects on transmission dynamics, which is really meant to track the spread and immune response to it. And then another 23 projects looking at therapeutics and clinical management. On the social side, because this was a partnership across all agencies for it, we also have a number of projects that look at the public health response and its impact, social dynamics and communications, transmission dynamics, and as I highlighted in my earlier comments, some of the misinformation and how is that being dealt with. Canada is actually well recognized for its expertise in these areas of social research for it. So those are the broad categories. I'd be happy to drill down further if you wish.
I know that that this is a global issue, and I have no doubt that Canadian research community will make significant contributions in their efforts to stop this virus. But could you give me a quick overview of the Solidarity Project and the role that Canada has played in that?
Yes, thank you very much for that. The Solidarity Research Project, which is an international consortium of countries to do research looking at promising therapeutic agents in the COVID virus, some of the very early ones being tracked. Canada is actually an international leader in that, and we were very early on. In fact, one of our investigators is a lead investigator on helping to design that and bring it to Canada. That was part of the funding. So $1 million went towards getting that started for us. So Canada is robustly involved in this. It will continue to expand, we hope, over time as promising combination therapies begin to look at. And from a research organization, we will be looking to see how we can assist in getting Canadians involved in that as well.
Okay, and what has the Canadian Institutes of Health Research seen in terms of scientific mobilization? What's come from it so far, and what can we expect to see in the near future?
Again, a very good question, and thank you for that. It has been absolutely amazing to watch as our colleagues have begun to look at how they can retool their research programs to begin to ask questions and to be of assistance for us. So everything from innovative clinical responses and trials to looking at different subpopulations. We have different approaches that are being brought forward on that. The issues with regards to the social components, as we begin to experience this more and more, we're seeing different questions starting to come forward with regards to the epidemiology and societal behavior. So we are seeing a brisk and really enthusiastic response of Canadian researchers coming to the table to try and assist with this across multiple venues.
Thank you. Now, I just have one final question, that while science has been very much in the forefront of all of this, we cannot forget about those in the field and those who have suffered disruptions in their work with the closure of labs and the postponing of conferences, etc. What has the Canadian Institutes of Health Research done to address the challenge of researchers, of trainees, of lab staff, and others in the field now that they too are facing the challenges of COVID-19?
Again, thank you very much for the question, and it is a critical one for all of us as researchers with that. We have been working intensively over the course of the last several weeks, even before we did the April 2nd announcement, to look at what mitigating strategies would be required to assist labs through a time period which we assume will be at minimum 3 months, during which their labs are shut down for that. So our first wave, we announced 5 different points to provide assistance to investigators. When we made the announcement on April the 2nd, we are now working intensively on a package to provide assistance much more broadly to investigators to carry them through for their staff, for their trainees, for the animals and research components that we want to make sure are well cared for in this. So that is coming as we speak.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
You're finished now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We go now to Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
There we go. Can you hear me? There. I had that muted. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everybody, for being here today and your presentations. And with all due respect, focusing on the positives will not answer the tough questions that we need to know and the necessary questions that Canadians need to hear. So with that said,
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, we can ask those questions respectfully, and that's all I ask.
Mr. Chair, we all know that public health operates under 10 essential functions, and I'm not going to go into all 10 of those, but 2 of them are enforcing laws and regulations that protect health and ensure safety. Another is linking people to needed personal health services and assure the provisions of healthcare when otherwise unavailable. And we all know that, and one of the services that is not being talked about a lot is the services of testing. And we do know that there are 2 different types of testing. There's the nucleic acid testing, which tells us immediately whether I have the disease or not, whether I have the virus. And then there are the serology assays, which tell us whether I've been exposed to it and have I developed antibodies to it. And so those are things that have been brought up by Professor Attaran and as well by Dr. Strong in question of testing. So my question really, first off, to Professor Attaran, do you see Professor, do you see the value of the expansion in the immunity testing, that's as well as as we see it, especially for those people that are exposed to it. You know, workers that have fallen, workers that are wanting to get back, our nurses, our doctors that have been exposed and want to get back to work, how quickly they can do that.
Dr. Kitchen, thank you. It's an excellent question. It's one we need to think about. At some point, although it's not now, this country will have widespread ability to test people who have been infected and either developed antibodies or not to the virus. And we hope that those who have antibodies are protected from it. There is a little scientific asterisk about whether that's true. I think it is very likely to be true, but there needs to be some more research done in this area, and it's being done quickly. When we get to the point of being able to test people to ascertain whether they have been previously infected, developed antibodies, and therefore are likely, not certainly, but likely immune, it would be helpful to have a scheme in place where we could, I'm going to use the word loosely, passport those individuals. Could we give them some sort of passport that says they are likely to be immune so that they can be placed in perhaps the most forward-facing, riskiest jobs? Why? Because with immunity, they're likely to be quite safe compared to those who aren't. Now, this does get into a complex area of sharing health information and perhaps limiting for a short emergency period of time how we use health information in ways that we normally would never want to contemplate. But I think unless we take a studied look at that question and are willing to consider using health information in these unusual ways, we'll just end up making our next year more painful and risky than it otherwise needs to be. So this is a very good area for Parliament to look at temporary emergency legislation.
And thank you for that. And it's a big challenge as we go forward on that whole aspect of, do I walk around with an immunity passport to show that I've been immunized? Because as you know as well as I do, not everybody that's exposed to an agent necessarily actually develops an antibody to do that. And does that now become an issue that we concern ourselves with at restricting people's freedoms?
You're absolutely right. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but what I am saying is that, nor am I saying that an antibody test will give 100% accurate results. It will give false negatives and false positives, which, depending on the context, can be problematic. But what I am saying is that use of a person's immunological status is something that maybe is in that person's own best interest. Wouldn't you love to know? Wouldn't you love to know if you were immune right now and you could go out into the world and take it on without fear? I think most people would like to know that. But to get to a point where they can know that, or society at large can know that about groups of people, is going to require putting some water in the wine of personal privacy and how health information has been handled. And there's a knee-jerk thinking, a knee-jerk way of thinking that any dilution of privacy over health information is terribly bad. It needs a more studied look than that.
Thank you. And I'm interested actually to hear, hopefully from you and Dr. Strong on this next question, because one of my, we hear about misinformation, and there's a lot of drugs out there that are people are throwing out there to say these are being used or should be used. And Dr. Strong, I know you will answer from a research point of view because we don't have the research on it. But drugs like remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine, erythromax, erythromycin, etc. These drugs people are utilizing, and we don't have the research to support the value of it. But I'd be interested to hear from both of you quickly where you see that, where do we need to go? And maybe, Dr. Strong, maybe we start with you. Is there research being done on these that we are doing in Canada?
Thank you, Rich, for the question. You're absolutely correct with those. The single worst thing that we can do is a bunch of small, underpowered studies that will not allow us to answer the questions that you're raising. So one of the focuses that we are working on now intensively with Health Canada, as well as across our partner groups, are to ensure that there is an avenue by which these studies can be done and done in a manner in which they will be truly informative to us and have an answer for it. A lot of the things that are being reported out in the community right now with regards to certain drug efficacies are on extremely small numbers. And what we are learning about this disease is that somebody who's 30 years old, as we all know, is not the same in the disease as somebody who's 70 or 80 and such. So being able to answer your questions, not only in the broader sense, but in terms of, and what populations will they work at? So we are working hard on that. Those things are coming forward as we speak. And we will be able to answer more. It is a very strong Canadian focus.
Professor Attaran, do you have a response? I think I've got a little bit more time, don't I, Mr. Chair?
You know, you're actually done, but if we get a quick answer from this witness, we'll call it a day.
Doctor, what I said during my testimony was there's just no chance of a vaccine coming this year. What there is a chance of is a drug coming out of the type of clinical trials that Dr. Strong just described. Yes, they have to be large trials. Yes, they have to be well designed. A drug that would either blunt the worst consequences of infection, i.e., a drug that reduces the chances of death, or a drug that, if given early, prevents the disease advancing to that point and perhaps even makes that person less infectious to others. I am reasonably optimistic drug trials will find that, but don't I wish they had found it by yesterday? We all do, and I'm afraid it's just going to take time. And in the meantime, Dr. Strong's caution not to overinterpret small studies is a good one.
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We go now to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, 5 minutes, please.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, and hello to my colleagues, and thanks for the witnesses for coming in today. Very interesting discussion. I think most of my questions will be directed to ISED. First, I'd like to thank our officials from the Department of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development for joining us to answer our questions on the record. We know this is an extremely busy time for your department, so we appreciate your time. I was glad to hear our Prime Minister announce that 30,000 ventilators will be produced right here in Canada for use of our local hospitals, and that Art McDonald at Cape Breton would be leading the team of scientists working on this. Can you tell us a little bit more about the design that will be used? For example, I know that the UK recently canceled its order for about 1,000 simple ventilators, saying that it doesn't meet the needs or they need more complex ventilators. Will we be looking at a more complex design? And are simple ventilators useful to treat COVID-19?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. I will give a number of points of information. There are three consortia and companies that were announced recently that will be providing 30,000 ventilators made in Canada. Starfish Medical, Ventilators for Canadians, and CAE. The chosen ventilators, and in addition also the project led by Dr. Art McDonald that you've mentioned, and that will come later in the process. We're working on the manufacturing partnerships for that project right now. The ventilators that were chosen were selected by an expert review committee involving respiratory specialists, medical professionals, frontline staff that had to assess whether this equipment would be sufficient to be used in their work settings, would be efficacious, would provide the treatment. And also, importantly, these are regulated equipment that Health Canada had to look at and determine whether they would be able to certify this equipment as well for use. So in selecting these three projects, we essentially had all that worked out in an agile process at the same time in order to ensure that we would be providing equipment that would obviously be used and would meet the tests and for the health system and health professionals, which is the point I think you're raising in terms of, will they have the right configuration and complexity able to provide the right support for the patient? And that's something we built into the process that we designed.
Excellent. Staying on the line of businesses and products, Canadian businesses, as we know, are retooling to create products to assist in the fight of COVID-19. What's the most common retooling you're hearing about?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So there's I'll give two examples that are quite important. In the area of medical gowns, the bottleneck that we had to solve was the provision of the textile to make the medical gown that would have the level of protection required in the hospital setting. So in this case, we actually worked with Intertape Polymer and Autoliv, two companies that don't provide textiles typically for this kind of product. One is actually used for house wrap, one is used for car bags, airbags. Those companies went through testing to ensure that their product, the textile created when put in a gown form, would provide the level of protection required in the hospital setting. And those two products now are allowing us to unlock a huge scale up to 7 million or more of gowns being made from Canadian fibers. So we're solving that supply chain for medical gowns, which was a critical issue to meet the needs in the front line. That is also important in terms of sanitizer. We've also connected distillers and alternative support to create sanitizer, and we've now been able to procure over 10 million liters of sanitizer from some Canadian sources that were not previously available. So it's a fairly large scale redirection of productive capacity to the need of the front line. And again, I could add masks, surgical masks to that as well, and also the face shields, which you've seen a number of companies that have been able to use a common design that is approved and be able to scale this up across their operations. And particularly the automotive suppliers have been very, very relevant. A lot of capability there in terms of plastic, in terms of large scale manufacturing, and they've been able to successfully redirect their efforts to provide this critical PPE.
Excellent. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You have half a minute.
Okay, I'll have one last question here. Can you tell us a little bit about the research projects that receive funding through HESA? And I'm really looking at how does the research complement the work CIHR is doing? Can we talk a little bit about some projects in particular and the interdisciplinary approach to research, which I believe the Chief Science Advisor, Kara Tenenbaum, is somewhat involved, if not involved greatly, in this particular effort to ensure there's interdisciplinary approach to the research.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. Among the departments, Public Health Agency, ourselves, CIHR, and also involving the Chief Science Advisor, we're looking at overall the strategy to support medical countermeasures, which involves, of course, research, innovation, the industrial response required, biomanufacturing, and so on. So there is a very interdisciplinary process to bring in all the different streams of advice that are needed to make the critical decisions about what to invest in and what are the most promising initiatives that the government can support. A few examples in terms of in more industrial scale projects have been announced. Abcelera is a company in Vancouver that's being supported in working up clinical work on antibody therapy. Also a company out of Quebec City, Medicago, which is working on obviously a vaccine trial. Also a technology to scale that up into manufacturing that needs to be proven out. And it's a plant-based approach to scaling up the vaccine, which could hold promise of being able to achieve scaling at a shorter time period than using some other methodologies that have been used in the past. So those projects are being reviewed by all the departments and agencies which have equities in the question and be able to bring to bear the scientific, the technical, and the manufacturing advice to be able to make the best possible decisions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway. We go now. Allons-y maintenant à Monsieur Thériault.
Mr. Thériault, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is for the representative of the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Immigration. During a pandemic, health also depends on food safety, and our farmers are going through a great deal of pressure to just be able to make a decision, because some are hesitating because of all the risks involved, to make a decision to go forward or not, and to farm or not this year. That's a pretty catastrophic issue. My question is, number one, the process for temporary foreign workers is accompanied with a serious administrative burden. Why not have a visa that goes beyond a year and ensure that people can get into the fields faster? The second part of my question is, when are you going to announce an agri-stability program to deal with the crisis that we're going through and encourage producers to go forward rather than wait through an entire year of farming?
pourrais répondre aux deuxième question.
I could answer the second question. When it comes to agri-stability, we are constantly dialoguing with the provinces to try to find a solution in order to help farmers during this time. Some measures have been announced, such as increasing funds available through various agri-fund programs. We do have many challenges to face with agriculture. That's why we're talking about other options, which could include changes or other types of programs. Question. And so you're open to compensating them for 90 to 95% of this year to help them produce? Otherwise, we're going to skip a year. When it comes to visas, who's going to answer that? Every single year, we have a hard time getting our foreign workers into the fields. Are you going to lighten the burden of this process? It's always the same people who are hired by the same farmers every year.
Agriculture.
Agriculture.
Pas sûr. Immigration.
Immigration.
Je pense que il y a deux parties pour celui-là.
There's two parts to that. I could give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Massé, but when it comes to visas and work permits.
Quite quickly, and we align with the labor market impact assessment. So that's the part I think you're referring to where you'd like it to be usable year over year. I think there is quite a lot of flexibility built in and has been built in recent years around the agricultural group in particular, but I'll leave that to Monsieur Massé.
Monsieur Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Parce qu'à chaque année, les gens sont en...
Every single year, people are late. They're not able to do it. And often, Mr. Thériault?
Monsieur Thériault, we're wrap up questions. We're done. We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Professor Attaran, you mentioned that you submitted an epidemiological model today. I'm wondering with our last 2.5 minutes if you can brief the committee on what the highlights of your model are and specifically with a focus on to what extent must Canada's testing capacity expand in order to begin the process of reintegration?
Of course. Here's the model. It has been posted on the internet while we've been speaking, and I'll provide a link to the clerk. I'll also be providing my personal phone number so that any of you who wants to reach me later can without going through anyone. Please don't share it too widely. But I do feel that you may want to look at the model and discuss some of its implications. There's good news and there's bad news here. The good news is it appears that as a country, remember, we can't do regional analyses because the data are hidden. But as a country, we passed the worst of the first wave. We are over the crest, which is wonderful. The other good news in our model is that it appears in Canada, the virus is proving a bit less infectious than PHAC has estimated. We find it is on the low end of infection estimates that have been done in different countries. So that also means a smaller problem. The bad news is, as I tried to explain to you, we're all pre-immune. We're all still susceptible. And so when we lift self-isolation and go out, many of us could get sick. Some of us will die. What we need to do is, as you see here, just a bunch of little wavelets. We need to plan these wavelets, these epidemics that we are going to create on purpose in a way that minimizes how many people die and proceeds on the best schedule we can so we're not shooting our economy through the foot more than we need to. What the model ultimately says is that PHAC's model, the one they released last week, is terribly wrong. And the groundwork now needs to begin on sharing data more widely so a range of modelers inside and outside government can help you plan the reopening of this country safely. And we all want to contribute to that. I just hope you please help us in our work by getting the data to us.
Thank you. And a quick question to Agricultural Canada. Are workers who are working in meat production facilities, are they required to wear personal protective equipment? And how are they practicing physical distancing in their work?
Thank you for the question. Not directly into my area of expertise, but what I can say is that there are rules in place, and I know that one of the issues has been making sure that the personal protective equipment does get to them. So we're in constant contact with processors, meatpacking companies, and others to have those discussions and figure out how we can best help them to make sure that they're ensuring that their workers are safe.
Is it a requirement, though?
I would have to verify in terms of what the specific requirements are. As I said, it's not directly within my area of responsibility. So in terms of that, we can return.
Thank you. Do I have more time, Mr. Chair? I can't hear you.
Sorry, say again?
I'm sorry, I asked how much time I had.
You're done?
Okay.
So I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank our panel for sharing their time with us today. I'd like to thank all the members, of course, for being here and asking tough questions. And I also like to thank once again the House of Commons staff and technical personnel for all the work they're doing behind the scenes to put this together. We still have a few wrinkles to iron out, but I think we're getting through them. You know, once we on the front end start to push the right buttons and speak into our mics, it's working out pretty well. So thanks everybody, and with that, the meeting is now adjourned.